Hello and welcome to a Song of Ice and Fire battle report. Today we're playing a whopping 60-point game proposed by my opponent Stuart. We're playing Free Folk versus Night's Watch in a classic showdown, and the scenario is a modified version of Clash of Kings. 60 points is something that Stuart has wanted to try for a while. He has some very interesting ideas about how you could do custom tournament rules that are just list building and make it more complex at the 60-point level. But for today's game, we are just playing an out-of-the-box, as you would expect 60 points to work under the rulebook with no modifications as a proof of concept. The only changes from the base game is that we are expanding the table to a full 6x4 table to accommodate all of the extra units, and the modified version of Clash of Kings that we're playing has 5 objectives evenly across the center line. This was a banger of a game. I really enjoyed it, so let's get into it. For terrain and deployment, Stuart's focused heavily in terms of terrain pieces on corpse piles and forests and bogs, so heavy use of hindering terrain, which he can get around thanks to, say, Sworn Brothers in Night's Watch, and the -1 morale he believes would hurt me more than it would hurt him. So we've got 2 corpse piles, one here, and then a bog. And for my part, I've just gone with 3 good old-fashioned forests. They work very well with Free Folk. Free Folk have lots of units that can hide completely within forests. It serves them well. And then we have things like Mag the Mighty, who ignores defense rolls anyway, so there are no downsides to forests for Mag, so we have 3 forests that I've placed in this triangle formation here. Stuart's run the roll-off and picked turn order, so he's also going to have a deployment advantage, but not enough to overcome the number of drops that I have. Stuart's deployed along the left side of the screen here. Stuart's army is a unit of Rangers with a Veteran Ranger inside them, a unit of Stormcrow Mercenaries with Alistair Thorn, a unit of Veterans with no attachment, a unit of Crossbows with no attachment, Ghost, John Commander in a unit of Sworn Brothers, Cold Hands, and a unit of Sworn Brothers with a Watch Captain. So very elite, but he is making up activations with things like the Stormcrow Mercenaries, Ghost, and Cold Hands. He's only taken 2 NCUs in this list. We're only using the regular 5 tactic zones, no changes to the tactics board. And he's taken, surprise, surprise, the basic auto includes of Night's Watch these days, Aemon and Quarren Halfhand. If you're playing 3 NCUs as Night's Watch, then you can pick something for your third, but those two, the value of those 2 attachments, those 2 NCUs, is basically just too high, so they are in every Night's Watch list, and this one is no exception. For my part, I've gone a mix of wide and tall, and I've been playing a lot of Conquest: The Last Argument of Kings recently, which means I've been playing a full-on rank and flank massed battle game. So I had some theories of victory going into this game, and this list was designed to fully put them into play. Things in terms of the importance of maneuver and cavalry, and also force concentration, were going to be my key to victory. So what we've got in order is we have a unit of Bears and Mag the Mighty, but it is very worth noting these were my last 2 deployments. Neither of these touched the table until I had seen where every one of Stuart's units was deployed. I've spoken on this channel before in my Song Battle reports about how important having extra units over extra NCUs can be in order to control deployment, and although frankly I had so many raiders in this game that I was going to be able to do that anyway, this was an example of how powerful that can be. So these were my 2 most powerful pieces. This is 17 points that dropped down once I was confident where everything of Stuart's went, and they would be decisive this game. Otherwise we have 5 units of Raiders. We have 3 with Raid Leaders, 1 with a Champion of Bone, 1 with the Weeper. That's just a mix-up so that if I need to do some coordination tactics between the Raider units that I can. We then have Tormund Giantsbane in a unit of Thenn. Tormund is excellent. He's a great commander. He's my favorite Free Folk commander in terms of how he plays. Not necessarily the most powerful, but one of the most powerful Free Folk commanders. And he's great with coordination tactics, and all of his cards are excellent. And I felt his cards would play well in a higher scale game by letting me concentrate force, but also maneuver, and also the countercharge card in particular could decisively swing individual engagements. And we then got our final unit of Raiders with Raid Leader over here, Varamyr Sixskins and Varamyr's Wolves. The plan with Varamyr is actually, as you can already see, the first turn is played out. He was just hoping to go to whichever of these objectives was less likely to be contested and be very cheap scoring, which is what he would pretty much do the entire game. Now, as you can already see, between deployment and turn 1, Stuart has made a mistake, and he's let me do a thing that he should know better than to let me do, because I've done it to him in the past, but he was enthusiastically thinking about how this game was going to go and how the 60-point experience would be, and so he let me put the bears into him on the first turn. Most of what has happened is that everything has moved forward. You can see this weird curve in my line. That is to avoid, just to begin with, it's to avoid the auras of the corpse piles. All of these units are 6 inches away from the corpse piles, presenting their -1 morale aura. On the off chance that Stuart gets very aggressive, they would be positioned well to not suffer and cause Stuart to suffer from those pieces of terrain. With this objective uncontested, Varamyr has made his run for that, so he's yeeted off in this direction, and he's basically said as far away from as he can, but able to easily get up here next turn if it's uncontested. I want nothing to do with this unit of Watch Captain Sworn Brothers. They will annihilate anything that fights them unless I get the wolves into them. I would rather just let them have the point. They want it more. This is totally okay. I'm also concerned about Cold Hands, but I have so much force up here that I think what I can do is collapse the flank and fight in that classical kind of rank and flank style. So everything is moving out relatively conservatively. The wolves have run off in this direction because there's just not enough of my stuff over here to make a really big fight against these Sworn Brothers, so I've just given up on the idea of fighting them. They're 9 points, they can have this zone if they want to, and I'll deal with that later. The big thing, of course, though, is that I've used a combination of the horses, Ygritte, and Val, and Craster, claiming basically a selection of zones. I'm able to get a charge, just a native charge, thanks to the combination of horses and Val. That plus charging volley puts the bears into the ranger hunters on the very first turn. I'm not going first. I'm going second this turn. I'm going to go first next turn. So we do a bunch of damage. We roll terribly, but we get to attack and claim the swords because Stuart leaves the swords unclaimed. He should not have done that. That was a mistake. So despite the terrible rolling, we do a bunch of damage, and that's going to mean that next turn I'm going to be going first. I'm going to claim the swords, and I'm going to finish off the ranger hunters basically out the gate with no recourse. This is pretty much ideal. And it's going to set up everything that I want to happen over the course of this game. So as we move from the start of turn 2 to the end of turn 2, start of turn 3, we can see that the momentum that I've gained by crushing this flank, or by setting up the crush of this flank, is going to carry on in a very, very significant way. From top to bottom, we've obviously had Varamyr has moved over to this objective. When I did this, Stuart gave me a bit of a look, and he's like, do you mean to put your ass towards my Sworn Brothers? But I'm like, I'm not putting my ass towards your Sworn Brothers, I'm putting my front towards Sixskins when he inevitably, not Sixskins, towards Cold Hands when he inevitably comes back next turn if he dies, which is like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And we can see here Varamyr is making use of the forest. He's fully inside the forest, so that if Cold Hands pops off the table edge because I managed to kill him, even if he sort of turns up here and runs into the flank, well, okay, he'll get a flank charge, but it'll be a flank charge through a forest. I'll have my 3+ defense that way. It should work out reasonably well. In the center of the lower center of the table, I've used Ygritte's influence to stop these Sworn Brothers from being able to get quite onto the objective, but they've tiptoed onto it, and I've just moved up to kind of contest them a little bit with the Raiders. The main thing the Raiders are doing here actually is just stopping these Sworn Brothers. They're a 4-point body block for these wolves, and the reason why the wolves are there is because Cold Hands went for a charge on Tormund's unit and rolled a 2 and whiffed it. He just didn't quite get in. He needed a 2+ to get around the bog. And so then the wolves and Tormund just went into him and annihilated him. Which has scored me a tasty 2 points because we're playing a modified version of Clash of Kings. Tormund was then able to surge forth onto this objective, so we've got one objective controlled here, one objective controlled here. Otherwise, there's just a bunch of posturing. Stuart has an infantry-centric force here. There isn't anything that's particularly agile in this part of the table. The only way he has to move is either Night's Watch cards, which you can get some basically shifts and change facings on, or by claiming the horse. And I've tried to stop him from doing that. I've monopolized the horse. I've used my free folk mobility advantage, combination of Val, etc., to really, really hammer home this flank. So with the Ranger Hunters going down very first activation, claiming the swords, finishing it off, that's let the bears sweep around to here. And although Stuart's been able to posture effectively to try and sort of like, he's tried to hold the line and set the Stormcrow mercenaries up to defend a little bit, they're not going to hold off a unit of bears. Mag the Mighty is doing basically nothing at this point. It's really all just the bears crushing around. They've killed the Rangers already, and they're setting up a ton of damage with a charge attack, charge clash, and charging volley 3 and charge into the Stormcrow mercenaries in the flank, which has put them down to just 3 wounds. I am using my activation advantage really heavily this game. I'm basically not committing to any fights until the NCUs are all fully activated because I don't want Eamon to be able to do a big heal. He'll do one next turn, but I want to hold it off for as long as possible. The Ranger kill, for example, relied on topping and tailing them, so it was attack into attack into attack into attack. Thanks to a combination of charging volley, swords, and then swords again. You do all of that so that there's no window for Night's Watch to blow a big heal into them that would let the fight stall out. So this is obviously, at this point, this is already quite grim for Stuart. I'm controlling this objective here, this objective here, this objective here, and this objective here, and I've scored 3 points for kills. So even though we have to get to 14 this scenario, because that's the base, that's the default in terms of scoring for a game that scales up as high as 60 points, I've scored something like 7 of the 14 points I need to win by the end of turn 2. So a little grim, a little free folk OP, but I assure you that I am having an incredible time. Just in terms of how the game has felt, like, yes, I knew exactly what to do because I've been playing massed battle rank and flank games recently. This is sort of like a familiar feeling, but that itself is worth noting because Song of Ice and Fire really is a skirmish game on square bases at the default 40-point level. And it's a very characterful, very interesting, very like, there's tons of interplay, particularly the combination of the tactics cards and how units are very agile for a rank and flank game. They move very adroitly. But that means that Song plays more like a skirmish game at 40 points, despite the fact that it bills itself as a rank and flank massed battle game. But this 60 points, by God, this was really feeling like the deployment and the broad strategy and the way that it worked felt like so much like an actual rank and flank that I want to play 60-point Song of Ice and Fire again. Like this was just out the box 60-point rules, and like yeah, I'm rolling Night's Watch up like super hard, but it was really interesting and a change of pace. Like the game played totally fine, but totally differently, genuinely felt like a massed battle game. Very impressive. Let's just wrap this up because you can kind of see where things are going in terms of how this is playing out. So moving through turn 3 into turn 4, the situation has collapsed for Night's Watch. The Bears, well, the top is the important part here. The Bears have broken through the Stormcrows, scoring me another point, and moved around and engaged the crossbows in the rear. The veterans have made their charge into Mag the Mighty. This is a relatively desperate play. It's helped by the fact that Cold Hands is turned up, engage these guys in the rear, but a combination of Crowns and Reform has let me kill this unit with Endless Horde and charge Cold Hands himself in the bond. So you can see that over here, Cold Hands has charged this unit. They've retreated away with Val. I've charged Cold Hands with the respawned unit of Raiders but not killed him. But then we've got, so Mag the Mighty has been charged by veterans. They've gone in all in for the precision. They've done 2 wounds to him, 2 or 3 wounds to him, which I've healed, removed a weakened token from him, gotten these guys out of melee with Cold Hands, charged them in to give Mag the Mighty gang up, and then Mag the Mighty has just gone kaboom. Between a combination of these guys and Mag the Mighty with gang up is just annihilation, and there's nothing that the Night's Watch really can do about it. So that's this unit is dead, the veterans are dead, the Stormcrows are dead, and I'm still controlling quite a lot. I've lost control of some of the objectives, but the damage here is too high. And although it doesn't get me over the line, the coup de grace is that John's unit has played for the Watch. He's charged off of the horse into Tormund's unit, done a lot of damage, as you can see, did 7 wounds to Tormund's regiment. But then the Wolves have gone in, the Raiders have gone in, and Tormund has hit, and have actually killed. It's been Hold the Line is what ends up killing John's unit, and because that's my commander killing the enemy commander, that's a ton of points. I'm still securing this zone. And although I'm not over the line to 14 points by this point, we gentlemanly agree that the game is finished. The game is concluded. The amount of force I have left, there's just no way for Stuart to stop me from scoring the requisite points to win the game. If not the end of this turn, then the next. So we've wrapped up by the end of turn 4. So the game plays just as quickly. Unsurprisingly, right? We have more units. Everything is very violent. There's tons of kills, and we played a 5-objective scenario with plenty of access to those objectives. So tons and tons of capacity to score. If you are interested, we are working on custom, like slight custom rules for playing 60 points as its own full thing. In terms of scenarios, it will use all of the same scenarios, just expanded out slightly for a 6x4 table, and at most 1 or 2 additional objectives per scenario. You don't need more than that. So for example, with Game of Thrones, probably move up to 6 objectives, 2 center ones spaced out. For Clash of Kings in this scenario, 5, and basically in that vein. You don't want that many more objectives. You can just use the regular scenarios if you want, but they benefit from maybe 1 more. And in the same vein, you want 15 points to win rather than 14. 15 is a better number. Kind of makes a lot of sense. This game is 50%. This is a 50% increase of the usual points, so 50% increase in how many points you have to score. The big change, though, and this is something that we are going to test, but Stuart's proposed it, and I think it's a hell of an idea in terms of really interesting, chewy list construction, is 2 commanders. But how this is going to play is, so firstly, your hand size will be increased, something like a minimum hand size of 5, maximum of 7. This is because you will have a 30 card deck. So it'll be your usual base list, 1.5 times the size. So rather than 2 of every card, it will be 3 of every card. And you'll have 2 commanders. You'll have your commander, who will function exactly as normal, and then your army's lieutenant, which is a secondary commander who will add only 1 of each of their cards into your deck. That will give you a 30 card deck, where you'll have 3 of each regular faction card, 2 of each primary commander card, and 1 of each secondary commander card. So you have lots of like combinations that you could play. So you might play, if you're playing Lannisters, for example, you might play Tywin Commander with Gregor as your lieutenant. You'll only have 1 of each of Gregor's cards, but that's probably pretty appropriate because really you're taking Gregor for his awesome attachment. And so he makes an excellent lieutenant rather than necessarily you wouldn't play Gregor Commander, or wouldn't necessarily play Gregor Commander Tywin Lieutenant. We have some fairly basic rules for how Mag the Mighty in particular works in this scenario, but he works exactly as you'd expect. We'll publish this at some point, probably as a Google Doc. And then the only other actual change that needs to be made to game mechanics is every unit in the game that gives you increased hand size needs to be read as +1 to your minimum and maximum hand size, not as they're currently written, which is that they hard replace. So Tyrion, for example, does not make your minimum hand size 4. He increases your minimum hand size by 1 so that he actually works in this. We will test that out, see if it's a little bit too much. As it was, just 60 points, played smooth. We finished up not much extra time than we would have normally, even with us both really not having any particular idea of how the game would play out. It played in relatively similar time. It is pretty likely that managing more cards will add extra time, managing an extra commander will add extra time. Song of Ice and Fire already plays quickly, so that isn't too concerning. But this is just a like casual tournament, go kinda nuts format. If you play that, we'll experiment with it a little bit, and you can maybe expect to see some battle reports if you're interested of that format. I think it's got a ton of potential, but I also think just playing 60 points was cool. I didn't expect it to be. Some games don't scale up well. There are games that really just, like War Machine, for example, wanted to just be played at whatever the recommended points level was. It didn't really scale up or down particularly well. This Song of Ice and Fire, as it turns out, doesn't just scale up well, but it transforms as it does. And that is super interesting. So I hope you've enjoyed this. As always, if you like these battle reports, if you like the channel, you can support me via the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description. I do take requests for factions to be played, and for armies to be played, and for scenarios, things like that. If there's something that you'd like to see in any of the game systems that I play, channel supporters are welcome to request them. Otherwise, as always, I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you next time.